All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the imho.love show. Welcome aboard. My name is Lou Angelwolf, and I'm your host for tonight. My co-host right next to me, Michael Murburg.
Present and accounted for, sir.
Yes, sir. Here we are, folks, at the fabulous Tan Talk Studios in downtown Clearwater. We are broadcast on several AMs, AM 1340, 1350, 1400 here in the Tampa Bay area. Also, two FM positions, 104.3 and 106.1.
And 102.3.
And 102.3. What are you guys picking these things up? Are they just like hubcaps flying off of cars somewhere? Anyway, and of course, you can watch the show live on the YouTube. That's you go to tantalk1340.com, and YouTube is we have the YouTube feed there, and I'm on the Facebook with the from my homepage, Lou Angel Wolf, and we're also broadcasting out of Tan Talk 1340 on the Facebook as well.
And go to YouTube at imho.love, where you can find all the prior shows stockpiled and recently published as well. So when we're done here, within a day or two, you'll get the show on imho.love on YouTube. Like us and subscribe and post to friends. Thank you very much.
Yes, please share. And if you're enjoying the show, like I've had wonderful folks get in touch throughout the week, and thank you so much. Hey, Steve Oakes and Mark Cottingham, Stephen Sherman, and everybody. Oh, Bonnie Street. Hello.
And Terry Ling has posted our show. She's with Move On here in Lakeland. Many followers, and she actually heard the show for the first time the other night and raved about it.
Well, very good. Well, enough patting ourselves on the back, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are in the it's only like the second week of summer here in Central Florida, where the show comes out of. It's the heat index have been in the hundreds for the last week or so.
Yeah, the cars all slow down because the pavement's melting.
I always wondered where they came up with that heat index. You know,
it was Office Depot, and literally the heat just sucked my breath out of my lungs. It was like backdraft.
You know, it's when you get out of the car with the AC on, then you jump out in this humidity. It gives you a nice opportunity to clean your glasses.
Yeah,
because they fog up real nice for you. But that was my joke. Well, they got some fat guy sitting out in the field somewhere in a flannel shirt.
It's like,
hey, Waldo, says over here it's 94. But what's it feel like?
Feels like 92, but if your body mass index is over 40.0, it feels like 118.
That's funny. The fat guy heat index, which is entirely different. Dude, that's hilarious. Fat guys sweating are funny. Well, welcome to the show, folks. We do have the summertime blues here. So we're going to be covering a couple different things. There's some news stories that I'm sure will pop up. We were going to war for about a half an hour a couple days ago.
Go figure.
And now all of a sudden they've closed the pipeline on that information. So we don't know. It's July 3rd, folks. One day before Independence Day here in America. And what's really cool too is we have,
as we like to call it within the banking system, Codependence
Day. That's right. Pick your maze, any maze. Run through the maze. Pick your maze. And anyway, and that's what we've been covering the last several weeks on the show. Is kind of like the background beat is the beginning of the Federal Reserve, the pinching of your cash, and we've moved through several hundred years now, and what brought all this up is Michael and I were talking one day about how many people are just flat ass confused and disgusted, and they don't know why. So many people deal with the struggles of life poorly. Consequently, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, pornography, whatever it is to take your mind off reality. More and more people are seeking this because the psychological operations that have been going on for decade after decade, they're really starting to wear the humans out. And if you're feeling that fatigue, if you're walking through Wi-Fi all day, if you're sitting under fluorescent lights, if you got all these things draining you, you're going to be a little off balance, man. And what we're trying to communicate with you is it's okay. It's normal. If you're any type of contemplative person, you're going to go through these emotions. You're going to feel confused. You're going to feel like, man, everything I have believed up to a certain point is at least half baloney. And so what we're trying to do is lay down a little groundwork. Michael has a degree in history from Princeton. So this is a guy that really knows how to study. For those of you listening and questioning his sources and ideas, you're welcome to. And of course, any rebuttal or whatever, if you got your facts, we got ours.
Find the number and call on in.
Yeah.
Actually, I mentioned to Lou coming on in tonight that it was I also taught history for 2 years and for a living, and doing this kind of opens up those old panoplies to me. But before we get into what we're doing, and what we will get into is the cause of the American Revolution somewhere during the show, and the economic causes for it, and what was going on in the country.
Okay,
and
that's patriotic for July 4th,
and George Washington's worst mistake.
Yes. Okay.
We'll get into that, but you mentioned the summertime blues, and before we got on, Tina Turner was playing. And, one of the great blues singers, she's still alive, and she's a Nichiren Buddhist. And a lot of her most recent songs are Buddhist chants and Buddhist music. And they're absolutely wonderful. Find them, download them, purchase them, whatever you want. Matter of fact, a couple of years ago when I started the CE5 group, I would listen to her things before going out because they're just so absolutely beautiful.
Really?
Absolutely beautiful. You want to set a mindset before you go out for a CE5, find your Nichiren chants and songs, and you go play it. And if you aren't mellowed down to a puddle of pure water by the time you get out there, you're just not listening. So, another historical tidbit too.
Okay.
And I thought you might be interested in this. Do you know where the use of the middle finger comes from?
I've read a couple things on it, and one of them was during King Arthur days. The archers would always pull their bow back with their middle finger, and when the enemy would capture them, they would cut that finger off to make their archery less accurate.
Right. Well, actually, with where it really got its start, you're very, very close.
Okay.
And it was the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, where the English invaded France. They thought they had an opening because King Charles II of France thought he was made of glass. I mean, he was absolutely bat whack crazy.
Yeah.
And
he was made of glass.
He was made of glass.
Nice.
So of course he didn't fight.
Of course he's made of glass. How could he?
And Henry V actually took the fight on in. He was so engulfed in battle that one of the jewels from his crown got hacked off with a sword.
Oh no!
Yeah, so they were into it. But what happened is England invades France, which is go figure.
Hold on, I got to ask you, how did he die? Ball peen hammer?
No, he didn't. He survived this. He survived this, but a couple of his men didn't do so well. But
he's got a ball peen hammer.
But what happens is the English are suffering terrible from dysentery. They get to Agincourt only to meet up with the French army made up of nobles that are 3 or 4, maybe 5 times the size of the English army, and the English army is a bunch of bowmen. Nobody's noble. They're just regular old guys. Okay, and in England for
guys from the pub.
Well, yeah, in England for 100 years, every Sunday or every Saturday you would go out, and this happened in the United States too in the early times in the Revolutionary War and the era after. The local militias would always go out on a Saturday. They'd have a kegger and they would practice their shooting skills. And they became very good marksmen, and was one of the reasons why we were able to do what we did when the British invaded us in 1812.
Less bullets, mate.
So what happens is you got these like seasoned archers. Okay. These guys had been at war with the Welsh, and they'd been doing this for 10, 15 years, and they're down on their luck, and they know it's their last stand. All right. And then here you got the French, who are all noblemen. They didn't allow like regular guys who
Really?
deploy into the army. Yeah, really. And
Men of caliber.
men of caliber. And what happens is that the French said, "Hey, look, if we capture you, we're going to cut your fingers off, so you can never pull a bow back again." And ergo, what happened is at the Battle of Agincourt, the reply of the English and Welsh bowmen was,
Hello, the salute.
the stunad, the ungats. So that's where it comes from.
That's great. That's a nice piece of history there.
And that came from kind of my my side trip into history and reading on some of these things this week. So,
well, excellent. Well, thanks for the gingerbread.
Well, yeah, thanks. I think the last time we left off was 1693-ish, when retired pirate William Patterson helped found the Bank of England to loan the English king.
What year are we in now?
It was 1693. And just to recap, this retired pirate was allowed to create money from nothing to finance the imperial state at 8%. They also started the 20% income tax, creating a world of constant war and expansion of empire. This was money from nothing, and war and debt slavery followed in perpetuity with the English people and continues on today. And eventually this pitted the Rothschild central style banks versus the state banking systems throughout the rest of the world, and kind of ended in the 20th and 21st century with war with Japan, Germany, Italy, and most recently with Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, where we invaded. If you take a look at all these wars as wars by the banks against against state banks, not national banks or central banks, but banks that are owned by the people to conquer it's bank against the rest. This is not nation against nation. Banks just use other nations to create these wars to topple governments so they can establish their banks in the territory and then put those other people into slavery.
That completely makes sense. Well, that the banks would be behind nations.
Right. They orchestrate it all. So we moved to 1696, where the fractional reserve was reduced to 2%. In the United States, even with the Fed, we have a 10% fractional reserve system.
Right.
But back in 1696, the Crown was so happy to get money from nothing and immediate financing. This is like a buy here, pay here.
I'll take a deuce.
I'll take it. So they allowed the bankers, and by at this time, these are not Jewish bankers. These are pirates.
Right.
These are Englishmen who have taken it upon themselves to rape their own people.
Yes.
And so
they're pirates.
Right. And they allowed them to get by with a 2% fractional reserve of gold, which basically means that for every dollar you get, you only have to keep back 2 cents, and you can loan out 98 cents of it. Nice. And the guy you loan it to only needs to keep like 1.8 cents, and he loans out the 98%. And this system continues on and on and on.
Sure.
So, and it's essentially what we have today, but it's worse because back then you didn't have such an open. There weren't banks on every corner.
No, right. You had to travel,
and credit was still fairly difficult, and everybody was still paying a 20% tax on their labor. So, 1696 they instituted 2% fractional reserve for gold. 1709, England joins with Scotland. They say, okay, we're better together than we are apart. But the first thing that England does is they seize control of the Royal Scottish Mint.
Why not?
I was like, hey, what are you doing with my mint? They weren't your mints.
They're wafer themed.
I wanted them. That's right. And that's why today we get Tic Tacs. But that happens in 1709. And then in 1720, you have the War of Spanish Succession. Now,
1720.
1720.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden you have this national bank, and all of a sudden, and subsequently you're at war with another gigantic empire.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the War of Spanish Succession. I think, if my memory does not serve me right, it serves me right, the War of Spanish Succession was the largest war between 1720 and the Crusades.
Really?
Yeah. It was gigantic.
Yeah, that's
gigantic.
A big war.
And so what we'll do is before I go any further, let's talk about the the colonies in the United States, because in 1720 we have people here and we've established the colonies. And back then in the 17th,
those must have been the good old days.
Well, it was. And back in the good old days, each state had a state bank, and they issued script, and it was based on gold. And it was generally interest-free. There was some minor interest placed on the value of the debt, and they actually, okay, you're able to pay it back, and we're going to take a slight vig on it.
But there was a precious metal representing the loan.
Right. You could. This was not a 2% fractional banking system.
Okay.
If a bank had $1 of gold, they would loan you $1 at 1 or 2%. And they couldn't really loan more than that because these were, this was fractional reserve. But people made their money, they put it in the bank, the banks held it, and they borrowed against it, and they loaned, and they paid small amounts of interest. But what happened is that these state scripts, and eventually a colonial script that was essentially interest free, was mandatorily replaced by the English crown with English money. Okay.
Wow.
So then all of a sudden
This is here in the colonies.
This is here in the colonies. And all of a sudden you can't use what you were using as money. You have to use our money.
The state issued banking is being shut down.
Right.
Okay.
And so the English monarchy comes in, and the Rothschild style bank, the Bank of England, which eventually becomes a Rothschild bank, they end up owning it. They come in and they say, okay, so you go, okay, I got to use your money. How do I get your money? Well, they say, well, you got to pay us for our money. Well, what am I going to use? Well, you got to use our money. Okay. So what happens? What's the result of this? Well, the result is there's not enough money in circulation because England, the crown, cornered and controlled the supply of money. And when they do that, remember what happened when with the Romans, where you have the patricians that are creating the money, and then all of a sudden they decide to hold it out of circulation so that deflation takes place. So the people with the money, instead of paying dollar for dollar, they end up buying your stuff, buying your shit, for 10 cents on the dollar.
Right.
So this is what was going. The Washington and Jefferson and Madison, all the great thinkers at the time, they realized what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. They see what's going to happen in this. And at the time that the Revolutionary War took place, July 4th and the Declaration of Independence, the colonies had started to suffer from a great amount of deflation, and England was exerting its power on the colonies, and the result of the deflation was unemployment of
everyone.
50%.
50%.
50% unemployment. Okay, what we know from history is when you get unemployment above 40%, you really risk revolution. And they essentially sowed the seeds of revolution by doing it. And by, when you hear, it was on
50%.
50%, and then you add the taxes to it as well. And that was the tea tax and the stamp tax were just the fuses that ended up igniting the American Revolution. So,
man.
Yeah, so that's where that's how we got our start in this country. We overthrew the banks, we overthrew our overlords, we overthrew another country that was exploiting us, and they were exploiting their own kind. This country was made up essentially of Englishmen and some French at the time, so it was great for the banks. I mean, they could come on in and they could basically make slaves of us all,
and a couple million Native Americans.
Right. Oh, kill them all too. Just get them out of the way. They're on real estate we want. So, let's give them, blankets with smallpox and wish them a happy birthday. But we get back,
a whole nother hour.
Right. We're not even halfway done, but you got the War of Spanish Succession between 1701 and 1714 being financed by the Bank of England. Okay. So
it seems to be financing almost everything.
This is what they do. They finance war. Not only do they finance war, I'll end up talking about they create wars so that they can finance war and make money on it, because this is what they have been doing since 1693 in the Western world.
Sure.
Modern Western world. So you have the War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714. The cost of the war, 14 years of war, was 50 million pounds.
50 million pounds.
50 million pounds, which is pound sterling. We won't do the conversion, but just remember the numbers, because I'm going to be talking in millions of pounds. Okay.
And this is in the 1700s.
This is in the 1700s. So by 1714, a war that cost 50 million pounds created a national debt of 176 million pounds. Okay. I've got the numbers here someplace for before that, but prior to 100 years before 1714, when the national debt is 176 million, the national debt was only 30 million.
Oh,
so you have a five-fold increase in the debt that's caused by this war.
The war and the banking and the charging
of compound interest.
Compound interest,
right? So what happens?
Which makes sense.
Well, yeah, of course they're going to get. They've got to get their money.
They're going to get their vig.
Right. So what happens in
it's like not spaying cats.
Right. Right. Okay. They're flaying human beings.
Right.
So that ends. War ends in 1714. In 1722, the Jewish bankers, and these are the Khazarians.
Okay.
They take a majority interest in the Bank of England.
Okay.
Okay. Enter the Rothschilds.
Wow.
And
that was a deal.
Right. And you have 70 years thereafter of interest and burden and taxes being placed on the English people. And in 1792, you have something known as the French Revolutionary and the Napoleonic Wars. There are two separate kinds of wars, but you have the rise of Napoleon between 1792 and 1815. And guess what? Do you think at the time when these wars began that there was a central Rothschild bank in France?
Of course there was.
No, not yet.
Oh, not yet.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. They needed to establish a Rothschild bank in France. So what they had was England declare war on France, and there you have it.
And then they stepped in,
right,
in behalf of the French.
Right.
Lent them money to build a war machine at interest.
Right. What you have in 1791. We have the colonies going on. We overthrow the English, and we're successful. Okay, let's digress a little bit. Before we get any further into Napoleon, but in 1791, Rothschild establishes the first bank of the United States. It's chartered by Congress under Washington at the behest of Alexander Hamilton.
Wow.
Okay, so in 1791 they have
1791
they have and it's Washington's. I think it's his biggest mistake.
Yeah, of course.
But in 1790,
just like Woodrow Wilson's biggest mistake.
Well, yeah, and in 1791, the U.S. Congress grants Rothschild. I use the word Rothschild, but the Rothschild Associated Bank, but it was
the Red Shields.
Rothschilds. They're involved, but they give them a 20-year lease to do business in the United States. And Mayor Amschel Rothschild is absolutely, mind-bogglingly happy. So the next year, after he gets he
knows a good thing when he sees it.
He's a banker.
Sure, man.
So
here's this burgeoning country, and that's going to need everything, and he can lend all the money and reap all the interest on all the things that we're going to need.
Right, and this is why. And Alexander Hamilton sold the American people down the road. And they got to remember, Hamilton was not an American. He was actually born in the islands here.
Really?
Yeah. So he wasn't born in the United States here.
Huh.
Yeah. So he was a.
That's a trivia question. Which foreigner is on American currency?
I'm trying to remember the island. I think it was Nevis that he was born on. I could be mistaken, but so the next year, that's 1791. The United States gets crucified with the Bank of the United States, now known as the First Bank of the United States, because it was the first. There's a second one that comes up later, and then there's the Federal Reserve that comes up the third in 1913. But the very next year, in 1792, what does Mayor Amschel Rothschild do?
Opens another bank.
Tried to. He instigates war against France. Now that he's got a bank in the United States, it's like, okay, let's go after France now. Okay. So England goes to war against France, against Napoleon, and in 1803, Napoleon's out of money.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so his choice is to abdicate and allow a Rothschild bank to establish a central banking system in France,
Okay.
or he's got this nice chunk of land known as Louisiana, which it's not just the state of Louisiana. It was 1/3 the entire United States as it exists today.
Yeah, it went all the way up to like Montana.
Yeah, it was essentially all the land east of the Rockies and west of the Ohio River.
Yes. Yes.
All the way down to the Gulf of Mexico,
Yeah.
all the way up to Canada.
Premium, baby.
It was almost every flat state in the United States, arable land. So, he sells it to the United States. It was a great purchase. It was Thomas Jefferson that did it.
That's who sold it to him, or
well, yeah, I forget
when,
who
when
arranged
did he
but
buy it?
It was 1803, and it was bought under the presidency of Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, and then Napoleon goes to flip that property, and guess what?
Yeah, it buys him 3 years where he doesn't have to deal with the Rothschilds, and eventually he has to deal with the Rothschilds. So, and we'll get into this later. So, as of 1806, 1807, the Rothschilds are not only financing England in the war against France, but financing France in the war against England.
Hey, man.
Now this doesn't stop because
they got a winner.
It happens in the United States too. They ended up financing Hitler, and they ended up financing in the United States in the Federal Reserve.
As all this progresses, and it's so, and I'm amazed that this stuff goes back 300-400 years, basically running the same course that we have right now. It's the same game,
same playbook,
same players, really. I mean,
Yep.
a couple centuries later, but same gigantic monetary interests, which manipulate and persuade all societies. And like Michael said about 10 minutes ago, the banks structure nations so nations can carry out laws and have control and manipulative authority over the people in them, wage taxes on them,
and draft them into war, and continue with war, and continue with death, and continue with debt until the numbers are mind-boggling.
And yes, and of course, why do they do all these things? Because there's minerals and there's natural resources in these lands.
That we know that once deflation is introduced into the economy, that the people with the money, the Rothschild banks, come in and they end up owning it. That's look what happened to Greece this past in the last decade. You know, they defaulted on their loans, and numerous gems that were in the national ownership are now owned as collateral and collateralized and owned by private interest.
Yes.
So,
well, you know, there's a great old saying, and we're about to go to break here. If you're going to give a dance, you got to pay the band. And that's what everybody, that's what all these nations experience, that Richard Pryor actually said it best, and I'll censor it a little bit because I can't use the exact phrasing. He's doing the character Mudbone. He goes, "I knew Jesus. I told that boy, I said, you don't go downtown messing with them Jews without no money."
Yeah.
And
he whipped the bankers. That was his crime.
Yes, it was his crime. And so for as long as this has been going on, folks, and really, I was having a beautiful conversation just the other night, talking about how what we do is we wind up learning. There's various paths that are offered to us throughout life, and then we just pick our maze. So consequently, folks, if your maze is making you a little dizzy, we certainly understand that, and we're trying to help you sort it out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the imho.love show, in my humble opinion, .love. I'm Lou Angelwolf. That's Michael Murburg right next to me. We have to take a break, and we're going to play some commercials, and you know, and the news is coming too, or this brand of the news.
And after this break, I'm going to tell you why every American citizen should be ticked off to the hilt and be damn angry as Americans as to what happened next after 1803 here in the United States.
That's a long time brewing.
Yep.
We're IMHO. We'll be right back.
WTAN Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
WDCF Dade City,
FM 102.3,
WZHR Zephyr Hills,
FM 104.3.
But
Listen.
today, correspondent Caitlin Collins reports a Justice Department attorney told that same judge the administration will try to get it on the census questionnaire, which is being printed right now.
Now, what changed in between those two periods was a tweet from the president this morning calling reports that they were no longer going to try to put a citizenship question on the census fake, even though his Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross put out an on-the-record statement yesterday saying that is exactly what they were doing and that they had told the Census Bureau that they could start printing those questionnaires without that question on there.
A big increase in holiday travel, 4% more this year over last year, as nearly 49 million people go out of town for the 4th of July. An accident and flipped truck near the Lincoln Tunnel put a crimp in some New York and New Jersey drivers' travel plans, but the Lincoln Tunnel now reported clear. Eddie Gallagher, the Navy SEAL acquitted of the murder of a wounded ISIS captive, was convicted of posing with the corpse. And correspondent Nick Watt reports he was sentenced to time served and had his rank and pay reduced.
President Trump has been involved in this case, and he has hinted that he might have given a post-trial pardon, and that, we assume, is still on the table.
A Pentagon survey finds almost half of the female cadets at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy say they have been sexually harassed.
45% of women and 17% of men report sexual harassment. And about 1 out of every 8 women cadets say they experienced unwanted sexual contact, the most since the Pentagon survey was first taken a decade ago. I'm Jan Johnson.
Well, the Dow gained 179 points today, closing at 26,966. The S&P and NASDAQ were each up 0.75%. I'm Evan Haining.
Your old gas yard tools may have met their match. Right now, the Home Depot has up to $30 off select Ryobi 40-volt outdoor power tools, like the Ryobi Jet Fan Blower at a special buy of just $129. It has the power of gas without the hassle, a turbo boost for more airflow, and right now, a price no one can match. Today is the day for doing up to $30 off Ryobi outdoor power tools. Red, white, and blue savings, only at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing, while supplies last.
An interesting creature inhabits the flat, arid plains of many an automobile dashboard, the bobblehead. It's most agreeable and will nod along to anything, despite having no brain function. But when the bobblehead hears how Geico not only saves people money, but also gives them access to licensed agents 24/7 online and over the phone, he'll nod even more vigorously because he knows you should switch. Because yes, switching to Geico is a no-brainer. Easy, bobblehead, easy. You're going to get whiplash.
Hello out there. Tune in every Saturday at noon on Tan Talk for Connecting Caregivers with me, Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregivers. Every Saturday at noon, we will find resources, education, and a shoulder for the caregivers. I know it's tough, but we can work it out together. Look forward to you tuning in on Saturdays at noon, where you'll have tons of information. Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregiver.
Hello there, Tampa Bay. This is former NFL and college football coach Jimmy Johnson. Listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They can sure use the attention.
And this is former Major League Baseball player, Hall of Famer Wade Boggs. I also hope you listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They can darn sure use the money.
Hi there. This is marine wildlife artist and conservationist Dr. Guy Harvey. Please listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They need to feel worthy.
Don't miss the Craft Beer Hour every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. We'll bring you up to speed on craft beer events and festivals, local breweries, and interview the brains behind the brews. So grab a pint and listen to the Craft Beer Hour every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network, and visit the website, thecraftbeerhour.com.
Hi, everybody. This is Jerry Barasano, the voice. Join the Pinhead, Rob Wild, and I beginning March 29, every Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. during drive time. Join us for Voice of the Pinhead Show right here on Tan Talk Radio. Relax, enjoy, start the weekend out right. Get away from all your stress and troubles. Have fun, laugh, smile. Join us starting March 29 right here on Tan Talk Radio.
Tuesday, the Rays were looking for a series win against the Baltimore Orioles. Brandon Lau got them off to a good start.
Swinging a high drive way up into the air and to right. Did he get enough? Back towards the wall. Santander. He looks up. It's gone. Home run. Brandon Lau has already taken a hit away with his mitt, and now he rounds the bases for the 16th time. 1-0 Rays.
Lau did leave the game later with a right leg bruise after collecting 3 hits and 2 runs batted in, but the Rays had an early lead, and Charlie Morton knew just what to do with it.
The 2-2 pitch. Strike 3 called. He got him on a bender, and Davis could not pull the trigger, and Charlie Morton leaves a couple stranded here in the 7th.
Morton's last 7 outs were on the strikeout. He fanned 12. The Rays go on to win 6-3, their 4th straight victory. Tampa Bay seeks to sweep on Wednesday, airtime at 6:30. For the Rays Report, I'm Neil Solondz.
Catch the Rays all season on the Rays Radio Network. For tickets, visit RaysBaseball.com.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's the imho.love show, in my humble opinion, .love. I'm Lou Angelwolf. On the air with me, Michael Murburg. And the phone lines are actually open if you want to call in during the show. 727-441-3000. That's 727-441-3000. And you can watch us on tantalk1340.com on YouTube. We're on Facebook Live on Lou Angelwolf and on Tan Talk 1340 Facebook page as well. And of course, all the shows are archived at imho.love, and they are permanently archived at BitChute. So if you ever want to find one, it's on BitChute. All right, my friends and neighbors and countrymen, here we are in the tomorrow is Independence Day. It's July 4th. People are buying hot dogs, and I got a little side piece about hot dogs. You see hot dogs on the package and it says in natural casing, which makes you think it's part of the animal. It's not true. Natural casing is actually derivative made by Weyerhaeuser. It's wood. It's wood melted down into a liquid form, and it becomes an edible casing, which they stuff meat parts into this little tube, and they twist the ends off, therefore making a hot dog, and your natural casing is a wood product.
No wonder it burns.
Yeah, but have fun. They're good. They're kosher. Anyway, well, folks, so there's my hot dog fact for the day. Vaughn does not seem impressed. Do you have hot dogs for lunch, buddy?
I did not, thankfully.
Every once in a while, though, I know all this stuff, and I know that they're absolutely garbage, but sometimes you just got to go get one of them big Chicago dogs, man, with all the celery salt and the dill slice and the onions and the tomato relish and the sport peppers and the brown mustard. One of those Chicago dogs, dude, man. I'm like, every bite I go, I know this is terrible for me. I know this is just complete garbage, but boy, did they put this garbage package together quite well.
Back when I used to visit Russia and the Ukraine, what they would call hot dogs is sosiski, sausage.
Sosiski.
Yeah. So now when I get up in the morning and there's nothing to eat, I take out a hot dog and I go, it's not a hot dog, it's a sausage. Just a matter. You want to change your life, you got to change your mind.
Well, and again, the manipulation of linguistics.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what really, that kind of is the core of In My Humble Opinion. Because folks, throughout your whole life, you've been processing information. You may have seen it on the TV. You may have seen it on the internet. You may have heard it on the radio. You may have shared it with a friend personally. And some things you may have even seen with your eyes. But you've been processing this information for a very long time. And especially the stuff that's been broadcast at you constantly. Like when you go to a Chinese restaurant, they always have 2 or 3 TVs on, just in case you lose touch with the world while you're waiting for your mugu gai pan. So All this information has been blasted at you since you were a little kid. I see people instantly plant their kids in front of televisions and just let the television raise them. Yes, indeed, it's hypnotic, and they're a little more manipulative. And they wind up being guys like me that can quote Flintstone episodes from 1967. So that doesn't make it all bad, I guess. But what I'm saying is the manipulation, the information that's been flooded into our heads, flashed across our eyes for all of our lives, it is getting fatiguing. And I know a lot of people my age and the surrounding ages that they're really just shaking their head. A lot of people get it a lot younger. There's a new generation of kids coming up that are very, very sensitive and in tune with the world. They understand peace and harmonious existence. They don't see the conflict. They don't want to participate in the conflict. That's why, a lot of people make fun of them. They call them marshmallows. What do they call them? Feather kids? What do they call them?
Snowflakes.
Snowflakes. No, I knew it was some.
You're creating new words, new pejorative terms for the snowflakes.
Well, he's a featherlight. He's not quite a snowflake.
That's right.
He's a little more durable. Yeah.
This is the millennial version of our heat index.
But you know what, dude? We didn't need another tribe of Ted Nugents in the world either. No. So somewhere in the middle, and this manipulation of language that we constantly experience. And that's another thing about that. I mean, I posted a couple of George Carlin clips about the manipulation of language. How in the First World War, anybody that was in combat and all shook up from it, he was shell shocked. And by the time they watered it down and they added syllables to the words, and then they made it sound like a medical term, and you're finally into post-traumatic stress disorder, which really minimizes what it is, because these people experienced absolute hell on earth and they're not getting the help they need. But we're going to water it down with a new term, post-traumatic stress disorder. That sounds like, well, maybe if you saw, a horse getting slaughtered, I could see that, but not what those people saw. Not the carnage and the bombs and the absolute fright to the bone of humanity.
Well, it's the same thing with abortion.
Yes.
And listen, why don't we, what are we going to call going in there with snips and cutting a small fetus apart and taking it out piece by piece? We're going to sanitize this and call it abortion.
Yes. It's the rephrasing. You're absolutely right. But what I'm saying is these young guys and these young women that are coming up today, making fun of them isn't right. Because they have a higher sensitivity, which, if we look at all of our religious leaders, Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, whoever you like, they were peaceful, gentle, non-warring souls. Because these kids, to me, are starting out on the peace track. They're starting out and they're trying to defend or fend away, destructive things or brutal things, embracing the peace that is within them. And but
they realize that there's nothing in this world for them left, because all they're facing is massive amounts of debt, and they're recognizing that once they put their foot into the system of slavery, they're there forever, and they're avoiding it as long and as much as possible, probably because of their sensitivities.
I couldn't agree with you more, Michael, but and of course there's the other side. I'm not copping to all that all the time. And there are some things that, if you learn how to not take things personally, one of the 4 agreements that's also the backbone of imho.love, don't take things personally. Words come at you, statements come at you in a neutral fashion. How you perceive them and how you perceive and receive them and react to them become the reality. The situation comes at you with no power. You give it all the power. You can decline it. You can avoid it. And yes, there's certain scenarios that are forced upon you that you have to deal with. But for the most part, I don't quite I hear more conversations about people being offended because of something they perceived or something that someone said, or they didn't quite understand the texts that were involved. They didn't quite understand the angle that the person was making the statement from. So, and again, this keeps us all off balance, where I'm offended, you're offended, we're all offended. This group's really offended. These people are offended that those people are offended. And I'm telling you, folks, it's counterproductive to a joyful life. If that's what you're looking for, that is the other way to go.
Yes. You offend me, I'll offend you. We'll offend each other till we all turn blue. We'll kill each other until there's no more war and go fishing and swimming in heaven.
Well, we can do it that way.
Hey, this whole thing on, things function based a lot on what you call them.
Yes.
Let's go back to 1803, Louisiana Purchase. Okay. So, 1806, 1807, the Rothschilds are in both sides of this war between the French and the English, and this is the big war for the West. There's nothing else really going on. This is the major conflict that's going on.
This is 1803.
1803 to 1806, and then all of a sudden, Napoleon runs out of money, so he goes to Rothschild and takes a loan, which was the beginning of his demise.
Right.
But in 1812, the U.S. Congress refuses to review the charter of the Bank of the United States. Now, they called it the Bank of the United States, but it wasn't owned by the United States.
Right.
It was owned by the Rothschilds.
It all depends on what you call something.
Right. Instead of calling it what it should have been, like Monster Bank or Frankenbank, which is what these things are. So what happens? I mean, the Congress refuses to renew the charter of the bank. So what does Rothschild have the English king do?
Declare another war.
Yes, and invades the United States of America.
Oh, that was a big day.
Yeah, 1812. Do you realize that the English army was in Washington, D.C. and actually burned the White House?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, this is the war that the Rothschilds brought on to the American people because Congress would not renew their charter.
Yeah, well, exactly. And dude, Professor Dude, this soprano style muscle, okay? Where do you think the Sopranos learned that from?
Oh yeah.
We're and I mean, this goes way back to, way
Caesar.
ancient. It does. But why do we think that we can no longer be manipulated that way? Why do we think our generation is void of those kind of things?
Well, it gets pretty awful. We went back all the way to James the Second in England and Cromwell having him tried and then his head chopped off. Okay.
Yes.
But in 1812, the British Prime Minister, Lord Spencer Perceval, he was trying to end the war. He didn't want the war to go on. He thought it was going to be futile. And Mayor Amschel Rothschild has him assassinated.
Okay.
He has a British prime minister assassinated in his own country.
Man.
Okay. I mean, look what happened here with Lincoln.
Yes.
Okay. Look what
that was
happened
all about the banks too.
Right. Look what happened here with Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's all tied in together. All you got to do is connect the dots. The strings are all there. So in 1812, we saw the English invade the United States. Washington, D.C. set fire to the White House, and eventually, Battle of 1812. The War of Late News. Andrew Jackson repels the British force in New Orleans. The war is actually over, but the battle happens after the war officially ended. He didn't get the news on time, but thank God we had to win something out of that. They burned our damn Capitol down, those SOBs.
Yeah.
So
we're on like our third White House, though, aren't we?
Well, it depends on how many facades you count.
Okay.
But it's essentially the same one, though.
Okay.
Yeah. So in 1815, you have the English still warring with the French. And on Sunday, June 18th, 1815, this is 3 years after the War of 1812 is over, you have the Battle of Waterloo, okay, which is in Belgium. And that's when Meyer Amschel Rothschild really earns his bones. He already controls the banking system, but as I said, he also owned what became Reuters, which is now AP, UPI, the American press system.
Most of the news you could ever listen to.
Right. So it all begins well before 1815, but he finds out that everybody expected Napoleon to win at Waterloo. He finds out that Napoleon loses at Waterloo, and he gets the news from his news sources 24 hours in advance of anybody else's news coming through. He spreads the rumor that Napoleon has won. He crashes the English stock market. Okay. Sound familiar? They come in, bad news, they crash the market. And then what do they end up doing? The market goes down 80%. He buys up all the stock at 20 cents on the dollar. The next day it goes back up. So he makes 500% on his money in 24 hours.
Yes. And controlling the information in and out.
Right. And it's mind-boggling. At that point in time, he really entrenches himself as the world power broker of money.
Sure.
Okay, now we're going to go back.
Who's better than him?
Well, like on Newport, on National Public Radio or National Public Radio, they at the end of the week they go, well, let's do the numbers. Well, let's do the numbers here just briefly, okay?
Okay.
Remember?
Let's do the
numbers. Brought to you by National Public Radio, where nothing is below us. 1714. All right, the national debt in England is 50 million pounds.
50 million.
50 million. Okay, in 1772, a mere 60 years later, it's 176 million. Okay, 100 year in a short 30 years or so. In 1815, remember the debt in 1772 is 176.
Right.
What do you think it is in 1815?
I can't see your notes, but I'm going to say 450.
$885 million.
Man, you just
so in 100 years between 1714 and 1815, it goes from 50 million to $885 million.
That's amazing.
And this is the time that we're not experiencing rampant inflation. This is almost pure debt. Jesus. Okay, and it gets worse. It gets worse.
Oh, wait, there's more.
Okay. All right.
How much would you pay?
Right. In this war that Napoleon had with the English and the English with the French, over 1 million civilians lost their lives during those years of war.
Man.
And 3 million military personnel died. 3 million men in uniform died in the English in the conflagration between the English and the French. Of course, it brought in the Prussians, it brought in the Germans, it brought in a lot of people. 3 million military personnel.
Okay.
So it starts making what happens in World War I 100 years later very understandable in the numbers, because they killed 3 million military people, in the 10 years before 1815. Okay, so 100. Let's advance. We're talking about 1815. Now we're going to talk about 1915.
1915.
Okay, 1915. 100 years later, you think some of this debt would be paid off?
In a fair and upright society.
And this is what makes everything so damn dangerous and why Americans have to wake up. 100 years later, by 1915, due to the compound interest of the war and to take on France and establish a national bank by the Rothschilds there, Napoleon cost, the war against Napoleon cost 830 million pounds. By 1915, the debt had gone from $880 million to $2.5 billion.
Oh, my.
Okay. Again, another five-fold increase. By 1919, after the war, it was $7.4 billion. The war cost England $5 billion in terms of 1917 dollars.
Wow.
All right. And by 2019, they were still paying on the principal of 3.0 billion out of the 7.4 billion that was left 100 years earlier as a consequence of the war. They were still paying on $3.0 billion of debt 100 years later.
And how do they collect this money?
Out of taxes.
Exactly.
Out of taxes.
And so, Michael, I've been studying this with you, and man, you're an excellent teacher, by the way. I wish I would have had you. That could have been somebody. But what I'm seeing is over and over again is the banks come into an area, they start a war, they finance both sides of the war, then they come in, they cripple the economy of the winning side. Okay. Then the winning side dwindles away and has to bow down because of the interest owed and the debt that's owed. And because this is all a fiat currency, I mean, I guess there was gold and silver back then, but still they were overextended like mad. There was no way they had 7 billion.
The central banks were allowed to create money out of nothing, print paper out of nothing.
Just like the pirate back in 1638.
Yep.
Well,
Great idea. You're a pirate.
Perfect. So what I'm seeing is the banks putting together nations putting together laws and land and mineral manipulations,
mortgaging their human resources as well.
And you and me are, you say, why, how can America borrow so much money from all these foreign countries? We owe China an untold amount of money.
It's because they buy our treasury bills.
And they buy our treasury bills, and they are backed with your back and your mind, my back, and everybody that's listening. You are an earner. You're part of the maze. You're a small gear on a really big machine, but they're counting on you.
And if you're a woman and you think, I'm liberated, I'm allowed to work. No, that was part of the program. They wanted to take you out of the house and put you in the factories.
Yes. Yeah, and all that went awry when the conventional family became dissected. You know, back in the old days, there was nothing wrong with a man being strong and a breadwinner and his wife at home taking care of their children, spending time, spending effort, raising good human beings, and living a, forward, thrifty life. Who we got on the line there? Who we got? Hey,
hello.
Welcome to imho.love.
Hey, it's Hyman Ross. How are you? Listen, Tony Soprano had nothing to do with the fires. It was my cousin, Freddie Pick, the guy who made the Bic lighters. I just wanted to tell you.
Freddie Pick.
It had nothing to do with it. I just had to make that clear because I got some friends that are Italian, and I thought I'd give you a call up. I got to get going because my throat's getting real bad. I'm really enjoying the history. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
And I'm starting to sound like Joan Rivers. I can't understand why. You guys have a wonderful night. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Because it was actually Bicola, Biccolla. That's okay.
But that was my old friend Charlie Can, the comedian.
I was glad he called in.
That was nice.
Hey,
okay,
we're coming at the end of the hour.
Yeah, we're in the home stretch. 2 minutes.
Next show, we'll get into the secrecy of this all and why it still remains secret. Because all this was done by bankers who owned companies, and they were private companies whose ownership was unknown to the public and only to them. And the same thing exists in the Fed today. So we'll go into that next time.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we hate to shine the light. The fact we're all debt slaves. We're just trudging across the tundra mile after mile with a mouthful of porcupine quills, but we are. And but you know what? You have a personal freedom that's available inside of you. You have the element of love that's inside of you. If you want to do a little research on this show, on the imho.love, you can find the Pacifist Riot, which is what this is all about. It's the Pacifist Riot. We are pacifists. We don't want to fight. We don't want to shoot. But we do want to get people understanding that there is a better way for yourself, for your family, and it all starts with you. It's all peaceful. It doesn't cost anything. It's something you can learn. It's something you can really, really learn to love as well.
And please listen to us next week, and I will fill you in on this. Remember that debt in 1814 that was only $30 million that was the national debt of England? You know it is today, including just the war debt.
From 1813.
For 1814 to 2017.
Okay. And it was 30 million back then.
Right. And,
okay,
and
which is a ton.
200 years. You know what it is today just for the war debt?
I don't.
$1.8 trillion.
Oh my God.
So over time with compound interest, 30 million turned into 1.8 trillion. And if you count the social programs that the Rothschilds have created debt for, it's 5.0 trillion.
Well, that's and again, that's going to be an unpayable debt. So they're going to come crush us one day.
Right. And as we know, that when your taxes get over 40%, what happens?
Revolution.
There you go.
And I wish I had Michael Fronte queued right now, but we don't. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to the imho.love. Yell Fire is the name of the album. If my Michael Fronte fans out there, Yell Fire. Y'all be good, and we'll be back next week on the imho.love show. I'm Lou Angelwolf. That's Michael Murburg. We love hearing from you, and thank you so much for listening.
Peace, y'all.
Listen.